This is the PowerShell Podcast, the podcast for PowerShell and the PowerShell community. You might just learn something.
I think you'll enjoy it.
The PowerShell Podcast is a PDQ production. And now, here's your hosts, Jordan Hammond and Andrew Plaw.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the PowerShell Podcast. I'm Jordan, along with the shining beacon that we all look forward to in PowerShell excellence, Andrew Plaw.
Thank you, Jordan.
Like that one?
Here. Oh, that was great. I'd love a little bit more of the shine on the Jordan. You know, amazing introduction, Jordan. Amazing podcast. We're on like 76 or 77. I don't know. We're in the 70s, man. We're doing something right. We're having fun. How are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm sleepy.
I feel that. It is morning time for you. But you know what? Nothing stops us. Every single week we're dropping a new episode. And this episode, I got something exciting to tell you, man.
All right.
Friend of the podcast, we've talked to him before, Drew McClellan. You and I, we have a close relationship with him. Well, we're excited to say congratulations to Drew on his new role. He landed a new role at an MSP. He's going to be a junior sysadmin for an MSP. I think this is a really exciting opportunity for him. I just wanted to give him an official congratulations on the podcast. Drew, I'm so excited for what's coming next for you. Keep doing your thing. Great stuff is in your future, my friend.
I'm proud of Drew. It was great to see him at the summit.
It was. I've been harping on him. I've been saying get a new job for a while now. So it's cool to see that, he's doing it. You know what? We know what else is coming, Jordan?
What's that?
Our friend Jim Truer. We can call him a friend now, can't we? We interviewed him.
He has been on the podcast. Everyone that's been on the podcast is a friend.
Well, there is a new release of the Microsoft.PowerShell.text utility module, which is a module for with tools for working with text content. Link in show notes if you want to read about it and get it installed. Install module Microsoft.PowerShell.text utility - allow pre-release to get the latest release.
All right.
Good stuff. And
do you have more nuggets for us here?
I got another nugget. I know we love talking about PowerShell profiles. It's one of the ways that you take your PowerShell, you can tweak it a little bit, have some fun. It's critical to the learning process, I feel, into actually using PowerShell on the regular. And Harm Veenstra, PowerShellIsFun.com, you might know him as, has a great blog that he put out recently about the profile. Link in show notes. Check it out. A lot of good tidbits in there. We talk about the profile a lot because I found that a lot of people maybe haven't heard of it, maybe aren't using it. And this is just another good opportunity and reminder to create your profile, customize it, have some fun, do your thing. And you know what? Maybe we'll talk to Harm sometime. Should we interview Harm Veenstra?
I think we should interview just about everybody.
Okay.
We got plenty of time because we drop this every week and we're never stopping. So,
well, if we manage to get him next week, wouldn't that be just incredible? I don't know. Stay tuned. We'll see.
All right. Now, for the reason they're here because of the title. They see, oh my goodness, is that the Bjorn Sundling?
Mm.
And yes, it is. So welcome this week's guest, Bjorn. There you are. Bam. Nailed it.
Hello. Thank you very much. Fantastically fun to be here.
So before we started recording, we were talking. I was going to ask, what's your work like? Did you have a busy day today? And I think your day job, you are a consultant in the cloud in the Azure space.
Yeah.
But right now, what are you doing during the days?
Well, drinking way too much beer, sitting in the sun, doing absolutely nothing. We're doing Swedish vacation time. So most Swedes are away around now. It's basically like half the country just closes down and goes on vacation for a couple of weeks. So I'm in week 4 or 5, something like that. Just came home from a day trip to the archipelago. Just perfect.
It's like a double-edged sword. Like when half the country all at the same time goes on vacation, it means your usual spots you want to go hang out are probably going to be overcrowded. But on the other side, having that time off, that's nice.
And it's overcrowded by me and my friends, so I don't care.
That's
just
true.
Having the chance to do fun stuff together.
So you're on a 4 to 5 week vacation. Is that how long it is?
Yeah, something like that.
Nice.
I'm not entirely sure.
I'm about to go on a 4-day vacation, and I'm pretty excited. But 4 weeks sounds pretty nice too.
Yeah, it's really good. It's like we have even mandatory. I think it's like 5 to 7 weeks vacation for everyone, and it's mandatory that you have like, if you want to, you have 3 or 4 consecutive weeks every summer. Like Swedish worker laws are good.
When you get back, are you just eager to get into the cloud, get behind the PowerShell command line and just get going?
I mean, absolutely. Even though I spend my vacation doing more or less the same stuff I do at work, it's just different goals. You know, I often say like the difference between before 5 p.m. and after 5 p.m. is just which window you're looking at in VS Code. Like I still do a lot of work there. But it's also like, it's a double-edged sword. Like I said, coming back from a long vacation means it's like the first week is just like scratching your head and going, what did I do here? I do not remember anything. And like, yeah, it's good. You get properly rested, well rested at least. So nice. Yeah, starting again in August sometime.
All right. Well, I was looking at your MVP profile here. And you said something at the end that I think is very important and we need to get out there. You love no bean chili.
Yes.
Yeah. So
like proper Texas no bean chili.
Yes. I guess I don't know if you're aware of the battle you've stepped into here, but whether beans belong in chili is a heated debate.
It always is. Beans and tomatoes is also, or tomatoes, depending on your choice of words. Also one of those. Should we have them in a chili? I say no.
The entire premise, if we're looking at history, was, chilies and meat. Yeah,
chilies and meat and beer. Just boil the living hell out of it.
There you go. So, as actually, according to the International Chili Society, ICS, their main event of red chili, no beans allowed. If you do the homestyle event, which is clearly the lesser event, you can add beans if you want, but I mean, everyone knows why we're there.
Yeah, I absolutely do love like Texan food or Tex-Mex or Mexican food. Like,
makes them
it's really hard to find the good stuff in Sweden, but if we do, I love it. It's one of the goals in life to travel there and eat.
There's a lot of good food there.
Congrats on the MVP, by the way. I believe this is your first year with it, right?
Thank you. Yeah, it's 2 months now.
Nice.
Got it in June, so it was quite fantastic. It's been one hell of a year, to say the least. Did a lot of good sessions, and then ended up with an MVP title. And was like, it's just crazy. It's like super fun.
It's nice. A big moment.
Yes, it's still haven't really landed. You always accept stuff in steps. So the first one was like, someone nominated me. And then, I got the mail. It took like 2 weeks before I even went in and went, okay, let's just start clicking, accepting all the NDA, whatever. Getting the plaque, the sculpture thing. It's like, gets more and more real every time. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I think it already opened a lot of new doors, a lot of new stuff showing up, happening. Like, it's really fun. I'm really, really happy to get it.
Nice. Congrats on that one.
Yep.
Now, we met at PowerShell Summit this year.
Yep.
Not too many months ago, I guess in April. And you gave a very interesting talk on Azure DevOps security.
Yeah.
And as I understand it, that wasn't your first time giving this talk?
No, it's a continuation. So the first time I did it was at a user group, and then at PSConf last year, I gave the first big presentation, and then a couple of more user groups. So I sort of fine-tuned it and found new angles and found new ways of breaking people's Azure DevOps setups, and it just sort of grew on me. It's a really fun presentation to give, and it's a really interesting topic, I think. I spend most of my days working in Azure DevOps, and naturally I end up doing a lot of fun stuff in there. And I kind of realized that, many of the companies I work with, customers we have, like I said, when I did this presentation in PSConf last year, I said, so we have books written on secure development, right? Like, secure development is a huge thing. How do we write proper good code? And we have ages of experience and books written on how to secure your environment. when the whole DevOps movement and automated the deploy and everything as code showed up, people just started throwing everything in pipelines without ever considering the actual effects of it. And there's like so many like security breaches done that way that people just tend to forget. You know, I have joined companies I don't know how many times and just figure out that I can take over this entire environment, and since you're deploying everything as code nowadays, that means I own everything you have because you forgot your Azure DevOps setup or your GitHub setup. So I just found it a really, really fun topic to start talking about. And it's also one of the things, since so many people tend to forget the whole deployment process when it comes to security, it's one of those sessions that no matter how many times I give it, there's always a handful of people sitting in the audience going, oh, I need to go home and fix stuff. And that's sort of kind of the best feeling ever when you see that people actually learn from it. Not because I'd love to scare them, that's fun as well, but mostly because you sort of take it down a notch and say that you don't have to hire your security expert. You can actually fix most of this stuff yourself. It's just thinking about it, which is also one thing I really think why I enjoy doing it is because it sort of goes down a notch. And like I said in the summary for in the speaker's summary, it's like security for non-security people.
It feels like one of those things where the earlier you approach that or do the right processes, the easier it would be to adopt. But the further along the line, you're looking at more and more tech debt. Yeah,
absolutely. So one of the things I mentioned there in the PowerShell and DevOps Conf was turning off tasks that you don't use. So for example, you have like Node 6 and Node 10 tasks available in Azure DevOps per default. Node 6, I don't know if you're Node developers or if you do anything. It's like, it's not just old, it's bloody ancient by now. It's so full of security holes. And by default, you have a number of tasks that runs Node 6. And this is basically just a switch. You go in and turn it off. But it's on per default. And the more people, like you said, the longer you don't turn it off, the more people will start using ancient code, and the harder it will be once you turn the stiff stuff off. And you have like half of your pipelines failing because no one dared to update the tasks ever. It's like I said, one of those things that we tend to forget. Like you need to update your pipelines and your systems as well in there. Like it's an interesting and sort of overlooked part of everything, which is why I stumbled into it. Like, I really enjoyed doing it.
Now, based on what you've seen, how do you think people should be tackling it? Should they put more thought whenever they're implementing CI/CD pipelines and how they approach it? Or after the fact, should they all of a sudden implement policies and get things under control? Like, what's the kind of path forward for people?
Like I said, no matter what it is, actually, not just implementing pipelines and everything as code. Start simple. It's like whatever you do, why do you start by implementing two-factor authentication and turning off public access? Because it's default on, and it probably no one will care. And also never, unless you're like, if you're a really big company, you need to do it more strict and more regulated, of course, but never underestimate the power of the screaming test. Like if there's a setting or if there's something that you discover that you want to turn off or that you want to change the behavior and see if someone screams, because like in so many cases it's just forgotten stuff, and forgotten stuff, it's what someone who hacks systems lives on, like, you must remember whatever system you're running, you must remember that everything should be patched. We don't run unpatched software on our desktops, so why should we run unpatched software on our worker agents, which is basically what you're doing. So I would say start small and start simple, just like with anything else, or at least try to see where you could go wrong. I know there's like a presentation from PowerShell and DevOps Conference that you could look at to see sort of where to start.
And I think that a lot of generic security principles apply, like you're mentioning, turn off public access, principle of least privilege.
Of course, it's just I actually, like, before I did my first ever security session, one of the things I did was spend like hours upon hours interviewing and talking to the security department at my own work. Like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to look at. I have here my Azure DevOps setup. What would you want me to think about? Which trains of thought do you apply to me? Like, and one of the things he said was, like, trying to translate it from Swedish. Keep in mind of the of this access that you're given. Like, remember that you are not your security boundary when you run stuff as code anymore. Even though you are an important security issue, the boundary is actually moved from you up to a cloud service. And you have to remember that that cloud runner, or that host, that runner that you're running in the cloud or on your internal machine, that's a security boundary. And like, try to track every single step that you're doing, whatever it is, building, deploying, releasing, and remember that every part of this is a security boundary that you need to take care of. So just be aware of the powers given is sort of what he said, what the baseline was like. Remember what powers you have.
Yeah, and I think that security is everyone's responsibility. Yeah, I think we find that more and more.
Oh, of course. It's also one of the things I stumbled into the DevOps stuff quite early, or quite long time ago. And one of the things that always bothered me with the DevOps as a movement was the name, because we tend to speak of it like DevOps, and then someone started doing, we need to do DevSecOps, and that was like, to me, that was the most dumb thing anyone could ever think of. Because I thought, like, wait, so you're saying you started by only giving developers admin rights or administrators developer rights, and then forgot about it's quite clear that you should have done this to begin with. Like, involve everyone in security to start with when you mix systems up like this, because that's what you do in the whole everything as code DevOps movement. You mix everything up and have everyone have access to every, like, those boundaries of hardware and software gets moved. And then you need to involve security from both these departments or from both these parts of development in your main line. So it was like, one of the things I found really bad was the naming DevOps, because it sort of left so many people out, and people started doing DevSecOps. And I was like, yeah, but we should have done that from the start. And then I heard like DevSalesOps, which is my absolute favorite hate word. Someone used, like, we're doing DevSalesOps. Like, wait, what? Oh, we're involving sales in our development process. And I'm like, quite clearly states in the DevOps principles that you should ask your customers, which technically means involving sales. Like, what do we do? What do we need? Can we do, like, how do we do fast iterations if we don't know which goals we have? Well, we need to talk to the customers as well. Like, it's mind-blowingly dumb when you ended up doing this and sort of building new walls instead of tearing down the old ones.
Yeah, I think that, like, those changed buzzwords are like people's attempts at highlighting things that they see, but in doing so, oftentimes it introduces a lot more confusion. Like you're mentioning, like, it's great to get feedback and be driven by data and stuff like that from the customers, but to then redefine it just gets sticky and kind of misses the original point, which is pretty on target.
Yeah. And so, I enjoy hacking some security stuff every now and then, and I enjoyed learning, like, how they think. That was sort of how my journey into this even started. Like, just talking to the security department, because, well, they were actually quite surprised as well when I started doing this, because I was like, I'm going to do a presentation on some Azure DevOps security stuff, and they were like, wait, so you're asking us how to deploy stuff? Well, yeah, of course, you're the security department. I should ask you how I can deploy stuff. These are the rules for your part of, like, if you set up the rules in our cloud solution, well, you have to help me solve those issues in my deployment solutions. It just comes naturally.
Right. It makes sense. I'd be excited to hear from you, because in general, IT department is a department of no, like, this is why you can't have this thing. And security within IT is like the next level of no. And it's always for reasons they can't always show you, but it's very good reasons.
Yeah, of course. that's again like the easiest way to get around this. Like security department says no, and then I most of the cases I can't really argue. They know security better than I do. I can say that you're wrong, but I have an issue I need to solve. Just help me find a way that we can solve this together, where both of us is, or either both of us are happy or both of us are equally sad that we had to break something. But it's like in the end, everyone should work towards the same goal. It's like the company's best or the goal of whatever project we're working in. And like, if someone struggles to or argues that you can't do this, and my argument is that will, if I can't do this, it will cost the company billions of dollars, then you're going to lose that argument. Like, it's that simple. We need to fix the issue. We can't just say no for the sake of saying no. We need to work together to solve issues, which is, again, why I sort of had a hard time when people started involving other departments, like saying we can't talk to security because they are too secret. So we need to invent another buzzword for it.
I like the goal of equal sadness. And that's what we should all strive for.
Yeah, but it's like, yeah, it's what sort of we often end up with, because, like, of course, if you ask, you have the magic triangle of secure, cheap, and fast, and or secure, cheap, and usable is the triangle they use. You get to pick two. Whatever two parts you pick, you're going to end up with someone being really sad. Like the economy department will hate you if you set up a super advanced, super secure, and really, really good system, because they will have to open their wallets. Or you can do really cheap and really secure and just bring the scissors to the cupboard and cut the internet wire. That's really secure, but probably people will hate you and get sad if they don't have no internet. It's about equal sadness. It's about finding that part in the triangle where everyone gets equally, okay, I can live with this. I'm not going to like it, but I can accept it.
Lowest common depression.
Yeah. That's a good one. I'm stealing that one.
Oh, that's funny. So you're a consultant for Azure and DevOps. Now, Are you brought in as incident response, or is this not so IR? Like, I'm wondering if you've seen some pretty hairy situations.
No, actually, I'm not. I'm not a security person at all. Actually, that part's just sort of stumbled into. I mostly do. So either we're called in, like, for short term. I need help. We started doing whatever, like everything from we are planning on using pipelines for stuff to we have huge setups using millions of release pipelines and build pipelines and whatever. We need someone to just go through and structure it up. I have like tasks going in and just doing security reviews as well from the presentation stuff and saying, okay, I'm going to look at every single checkbox and give you a sort of report on what's good and bad and why and so on and so forth. But I work in a team where most of our actual job is sort of green or brownfield deployments of landing zones or large scale environments for companies. So I have like a couple of architects and developers and all kinds of people doing like fancy baseline automation for companies that use Azure following Azure like best practices. It's just that my part in this team sort of ended up doing the release stuff for them. And once you have a landing zone structure set up, I can help them automate their landing zone builds and their releases of stuff, or when they want to order new stuff, or like, yeah. So most of my job is just everything and anything in Azure DevOps or GitHub. Mostly have done a couple of other systems as well, but they're not as common, which sort of you have to focus on something, Can't be an expert in everything, unfortunately.
And prior to becoming a consultant, what was your specialty, or what were you working with?
I was actually one of the few people in the world who got the title PowerShell Developer. So I worked for 3 years at a company called Snow Software. They did all kinds of stuff. I worked on an PowerShell automation workflow engine. So it was like C# based, fancy automation, front page, back end could do all kinds of sad stuff. But I worked as a PowerShell developer and only wrote PowerShell solutions for customers like most of the days. Everything from most of the back end of that system and the front end was PowerShell. So I was a PowerShell developer for 3-4 years, something like that. Wow. But even then, one of the things I stumbled into, we were 2 people doing PowerShell only, but one of the things I sort of got the ownership of was the entire release process. So that's where I sort of stumbled into actually building, pipelines, DevOps, deployment stuff, was because everything was manual when I joined them. And I was like, yeah, this isn't going to fly. It takes like a week to release a new version of the software. That's not good. So a bit of PowerShell, a lot of will, and many crashes of build systems later. It took like an hour to get the system out of the door, which is sort of where I've realized that this is really fun, actually. I really like this. And that's sort of an interesting thing about the PowerShell, and the PowerShell community that I think I discovered, or I didn't discover anything, but that I sort of realized last couple of years is that we have changed quite a lot in that. Like when I got this title, there was a lot of talk about PowerShell. I mean, you were both in the community back then as well. A lot of talk about PowerShell as a programming language. We need to start looking at ourselves as developers. We need to start thinking like that. That was a big thing a couple of years ago. So when I got that title, like PowerShell developer, that was like talking to Jeffrey Snover style level in the breakfast at PSConf many years ago. And he was like, "Wow, you actually got that title. That's so cool to hear someone." Yeah, but then we sort of moved on, and now I feel like PowerShell, not just for me, but as a common as in our community, became more and more of a tool, just sort of our weapon of choice. I don't really see anyone being hired as a PowerShell developer today in the same way, because now it's just like, okay, we do this or we solve this issue and we do it using PowerShell. And that's sort of where I stumbled in as well. Like I started with PowerShell developer, stumbled into realizing development or release processes was what I enjoy doing. I just, whenever I do something, I just pick PowerShell because it's my weapon of choice. Like it changed how we look at it. And I don't know if it's majority or if it's the community majority or if it's the fact that they sort of stamped it open source and said, okay, we're quite done with PowerShell as an engine. Just go ahead and have fun with it. I don't know where it comes from, but I feel this changed a couple of years ago.
I don't know what it is either, but my impression is that it's not that exciting to be a developer anymore. Like it's not like the end game. Like many people write code, so many different roles are writing code. It's like whatever, we're all just doing work, and a lot of people are using PowerShell, people are using other things. It's not that special though. At least that's my opinion. I don't know if that's true for everyone.
Yeah, but that's kind of what I agree on and what I mean. Like it's not about a language. It's not about being developer. And maybe it's just the fact that I ended up in the DevOps movement as well. Like that's why I started thinking about it. But yeah, it's like it's just a tool, and you can see that in like many of the conferences and sessions and like user groups as well. Like it's not as much discussion about I did one thing in PowerShell. This is PowerShell or as a function, or like it's more like we talk about cool stuff we do, and I use PowerShell to do it, but this is the cool solutions we do instead. Like,
yeah, agreed with that. Now, to go back a few weeks to PowerShell Conference EU, I know you've been a couple times, right? How many times have you been?
So I've been there every single time. Apart, so PSConfEU is. And it started out with just the PowerShell conference in the States that had a spin-off in Europe arranged by the same people. So it was Don Jones and company who fixed it. And they had it in Sweden. I think it must have been 2015. And it was in Stockholm. So I managed to convince my boss that, okay, this is almost free. pay an extra conference for me. And then, well, they said, like, we're not going to do this again because traveling to Europe or calling Europe from bad times, and it was really hard for them to arrange it. And then Tobias stepped up and started PSConf. So that must have been 2016, I think, the first one, or if it was 2017. But I've been there every single one since then. So I haven't missed one so far.
Gosh, I'm lucky to finally meet you. I can't believe we haven't crossed paths sooner. You've been around for a while.
Yeah, I've been doing PowerShell since I don't know how long. Like, I think I started doing it using PowerShell when it was version 1 still, but I don't know. I haven't really been. Well, I joined the community in Sweden. I've been arranging the Swedish PowerShell user group for quite some time, which is probably the world's most inactive user group right now, but still. But other than that, yeah. Other than that, I've been keeping to Europe mostly. Like, just recently, I started to send proposals or actually do stuff in the States as well. It's a really shame that the PSConf or PowerShell Conference in Asia, I don't know if they will start up again or what's going on, but I really hope so. That would be really fun to do, but we'll see.
I heard great things about that one.
Yeah, really, really good stuff, and lots of good people over there. But I think it's like harder to fix for travel. It's a costly thing to do. A good thing I think about Europe is that most of the people here can travel for close to nothing. It's not that expensive to do it. And I guess that's also one of the reasons I started doing presentations in the States recently, is that I actually have an employer that supports it and pays for it and helps out, because it's a bloody costly thing to do. Even though you get sponsorships and stuff, it's still expensive as hell, especially with the value of Swedish money right now, which is basically nothing, squid, and absolutely crap. But yeah, I've been keeping mostly in Sweden or Europe, but I've been at the PSConf since it started. This is my second year as a speaker. Really, really enjoying stage work. Been doing it, like I said, mostly locally in smaller user groups and stuff. But then I sort of decided, nope, it's time to step up. Took me 5 years to actually press the button and click send on my PSConf sessions. I have written like a couple of times before, but never dared to press send because, I know who's up there on stage. They're the smart people who know stuff, unlike me. I just fake it.
Right. I can relate to that.
I think 5 years is actually a fantastic turnaround, because I know I've sailed right by that mark.
Yeah. It's I gotta say huge thank to the arrangers of PSConf, especially Rob, for keep nagging me every single year. Björn, next year you're sending a presentation. Next year you're sending a presentation, and eventually, he's really good.
Well, and he even started the program for first-time speakers to help them on how to handle everything. And we actually got to talk to someone that went through that, and it's apparently was a massive help. So it's.
Oh yeah, I heard
like the extra outreach that PSConFEU does to train up speakers. Yeah,
they're really a speaker-friendly conference. Like, both helping people get in, helping people write. Like, I know I've got some really good feedback on session proposals. Like, okay, this is probably what you should think about, what you should change, and they really take care of their crew, which I really like. It's a really, really nice conference.
We've heard really good things about the kind of mentorship, the encouragement, which is so important to keeping a community thriving, is encouraging people who are like in your boat. We're like, kind of teetering on it, get there. And then boom, now you're contributing multiple years in a row. You mentioned from your words, you enjoy it. You love speaking.
Yeah.
Did you have stage experience prior to that, or how did that work out?
I've been playing in bands since I was like yay big. So I think I started playing my first punk rock concerts when I was like 14 years old. But that's like a whole different thing. But yes, I do have stage experience, but stage experience from standing in the background and smashing guitars. Mm-hmm. But I believe it helps. I also believe that like I don't know how many times I've said it to random people. I believe that everyone who does stage work in any kind of way needs to suffer from part of split personality. It's you sort of dress up in this stage personality. And I think the advantage I have in that case was that I already sort of know how I get dressed in my stage personality. I have this routine. I already know what routines I have before I go up on stage, like what I need to do to prepare and be relaxed there. So yeah, I absolutely, I think I have had some advantage of it. But standing next to an entire band, you're kind of hidden when you do something wrong. This is like the ultimate, what's it called? Public exposure. Yeah, there's nothing to hide behind. Which also I kind of proved to myself in PSConf. One of the sessions I did there this year on GitHub Actions, I f***ed it up so badly it's almost crazy. Was like lost my thread. So went up on stage. One of the slides, I ran it right before I went up on stage. I'd run it through. I have no idea what I did, but one of the slides sort of moved was just gone, wasn't where it's supposed to be, which made me lose my thread. And I did the exact opposite of what everyone says you should do. When you lose your thread on stage, don't try to fix it, just move on, which is exactly what I didn't, which ended up with me messing up my code and doing a really, but it took like 3 minutes to get back on track. And then, everything worked out. And thanks to Torsten's magic, it doesn't look all too terrible on the videos. So yeah.
3 minutes isn't too bad.
Yeah, it could be worse. Could absolutely been worse.
At least you got back to the tracks.
Yeah, it feels like afterwards you just feel like falling through a hole in the floor and just, I want to die now. But then, I went back and looked at it and was like, yeah, it's not that bad. And also I think an important lesson, both for me and for like people seeing it, like everyone up. I have no issues with admitting that I messed that presentation up. I got it back on track. I still know what I talked about, and I still know that the code worked in the end, and I had a good demo. Like it happens, and it's scary. It's scary to stand on stage having a full crowd looking at you and only you. That takes a lot of nerve. Which, yeah, I'm really proud that I jumped the hurdle on that one and just got it over with, because the applause, that makes it worth it.
So
standing there feeling.
Yeah. One thing that I learned that is important when speaking to groups is answering with "I don't know" is not always a bad thing.
Yeah.
And it's better to just go with that instead of trying to make it up on the fly and maybe giving bad information. So I don't know is incredibly powerful.
Yes. Admitting that don't know everything is absolutely something you should be able to do.
Definitely. And I think that it's totally fine to feel proud of yourself, because it takes a lot of courage to stand in front of all those people and put it on the line, because even the best technical people in the world are going to make mistakes live. Things aren't always going to go to plan, and to have the courage to kind of ride that out and show other people like, hey, if you try recreating everything you see online, like you might run into some issues, and that's okay. Just ride it out and you'll be all right.
Yeah.
And you might even get an MVP in the process. Just
exactly. Exactly.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an adventure. This year has been one hell of a ride.
I bet.
And it's not over yet.
That's true. Well, your vacation is going to be over and you're going to get right back to it. But I have a question about GitHub Actions. What was your talk about with GitHub Actions?
So it was about sort of getting started with GitHub Actions. Like, I'm terribly sorry. I'm just going to 2 seconds cut out because my dog is scratching my leg.
No problem.
So
what kind of dog?
That kind.
A cute dog.
She's like a mixed breed. She's making her bed. There we go. 3, 2, 1. Okay, back.
Right.
Yeah, so my session was on GitHub Actions and getting started. It sort of stems from, I have a module called PSSecretScanner that was it was a work project to start with that I sort of just started thinking about, like, I wonder if I could do this. And I could. And then I realized it was really useful and I started using it myself in a lot of cases. And then someone, when I did a new release of the module, someone on Twitter just posted, "Oh, is there a GitHub action of this?" I was like, I have never created my own GitHub Actions, but that sounds like an interesting task. Let's write a session proposal about it and force myself to learn it. And that's sort of how it started. So I ended up writing a GitHub action and figuring out sort of, I think I've read through the documentation about 1 million times by now. Figuring out how GitHub Actions works, figuring out how they work in the PowerShell or in composite actions and in Docker actions, and which one I prefer to write, and so on and so forth. Also, huge shout out to James Brundage, community dude who sort of helped me realize this. He has a module creating GitHub Actions that I use that sort of helped me understand how stuff works as well. But the session was more or less about this journey of how to get started. Like one of the questions I got after the presentation was like, okay, what's the use case for this? Why do you create your own actions like this? And my answer to this is like, everyone does cool stuff, and creating a GitHub action is just one way of sharing this stuff. No matter if it's, you can build GitHub actions for your internal. If you have a GitHub internally for your company or for yourself, you can just create your own GitHub actions doing whatever your release process looks like, because automation's like not repeating yourself, but also because like one of the favorite examples when we talk module development, I think every PowerShell developer or PowerShell person ever has created his or her own password generator. So once you have done that, create a GitHub action, and then everyone could use that one, and we can improve one password generator instead of everyone having their own. Like it really is that simple. You're all doing stuff that people want. I for one, I hate writing code unless I need to. Like, if someone has done it before, why should I rewrite the same thing again? So the presentation is from start to having your PowerShell code in a GitHub action, doing, handling input and output and the many ways and issues you can have with that, and reusing them in workflows or publishing them to the marketplace so everyone can see them and find them and see how they're used, even up to like what documentation should you have or how does it look in the store when you publish it. So I think it's like a getting started session.
And I like what you brought up there of like, you don't like writing code. We have one of the best communities in the world. And I think that there still is room for improvement in terms of people contributing their code or contributing to pre-existing projects. What do you have to say to someone who maybe has an idea, maybe something that they implemented at work, but they don't want to implement it live? They don't know how to take the steps. Maybe there's already a module they don't know about. What should they do with their code?
Okay, so it's that's actually like two questions. What do they do? Like, how do you share your code, and how do you find them? How do you find it? Finding it, well, I mean, the gallery is what we have to do right now, and the community. Use your Twitters or your Mastodons or your whatever. I have never been in a friendlier community, so whenever there's an issue, just use the PowerShell hashtag, and I swear to God, they will have 1 million different answers to whatever issue you have. I even have a colleague who has that as his standard. Whenever he has a PowerShell issue, he asks the question and then sort of subtitles it under with, "I'll be back in a couple of hours when you have argued which solution I should use. So I'll just come there and you just tell me whatever way is best." But when it comes to publishing stuff, okay, so you mentioned if you have done something at work. So if you have done something at work, the very, very, very first thing you should always do is check with your legal department, because if you are like me, a consultant, for example, then chances are fairly big that whatever code you write, it will have a clause somewhere that says it belongs to the company you're working for. And if you were to release that, that's an expensive hobby. Yeah, that's going to cost you quite a lot. So check with legal and make sure that it's okay, and do not just stamp stuff with the MIT license default, even though I think that's good. But once that is clear, it's actually just start doing it. Like, and just like with everything else, start simple. Start with, publish it to a GitHub repo, and then tweet it out, or Mastodon or whatever, tweet it out and say, "Hey, I have this repo. I need some feedback," or "This is what it does." Because there are so many of us that's just curious, even when it comes to like just looking at the solutions, and you go like, oh, okay, but this line, we can improve this line. Is it okay if we change this, or is there a reason why you choose this path instead of that one, and so on? It doesn't have to be super advanced, unless legal, of course, corporations. I hate those people. But yeah, no, sorry. But yeah, other than that, just keep it simple. Like, and don't start with, I have to publish it to the gallery and market it and have a beautiful logo to it. All of that stuff can come later. It's just, rename your PS1 file to PSM1 and release it as a module. Doesn't have to be much more than that.
And it doesn't have to be perfect the first iteration. Most modules that we see aren't. We mentioned a Microsoft module is still in pre-release. They're still trying to get it right. And I recommend the same approach. Don't overthink it too much. And I got a friend in mind. Shout out to my buddy, and he's been on the podcast before, Clayton Tiger. He's been working on a module. Just get it out there. Let other people contribute. Let other people share their feedback. This is one of the friendliest, most welcoming communities. Typically, everything I've seen for feedback is pretty helpful and not rude. Not like, oh, why did you do things this way? You're dumb. It's like, hey, have you considered this?
Yeah. And that's also one of the important things you noticed there, that you said there, feedback. Like even if you don't feel like you can contribute something, feedback is like, I absolutely love it. Like positive or negative. I do a lot of training, and I even say that in my feedback form. Please give me negative feedback as well. Not just you're bad, you suck, but tell me what I should change, or what don't you like about this? Because that feedback, it not just helps us develop better stuff, it also triggers sort of the curiosity nerve. Like, okay, which is when you say that something isn't working the way you expect it to, what is the process you're working with? How do we think like you? How do I get this into my test setup so I know that I get this train of thought as well? It's all about the feedback loops, and like you said, you don't have to contribute with super advanced code. You can just contribute with ideas, or for that matter, point to a place. If you don't feel like you can fix it, if you have a bug, just say, okay, on line 666, there's an issue with summoning the devil instead of solving the problem. Like, just tell us stuff.
Yeah,
I have never met someone in our community who doesn't like being told stuff or being in a discussion.
Let's use this as an opportunity to present a challenge to the community and our listeners. If you don't have a GitHub account, I challenge you to create one. And as you're using modules or whatever, or projects, file an issue if you see something missing. If the documentation is lacking, if a litany of things, you don't have to solve the module, file some feedback. Get started with that. That'll be your first goal. If you're already there and you have modules that are already written and ready to be shared and legally cleared and all that, let's put those out there. Take that risk. Take that next step.
And it's okay to even have instead of having a module on GitHub, just having a my PowerShell stuff repo with one file, including everything you've ever done, because every single one of us PowerShell nerds started out with creating one PowerShell file, and on the very top you had hard-coded variables that you changed every time, and you rerun the script with a new variable setting up there, and then you had some read hosts and so on. And that's how we learned, because someone challenged that and said, oh, did you know that you can use parameters instead? Okay. And then you learn, then you sort of improve, and suddenly you end up with these massively super cool solutions for your specific issues that you can release as GitHub Actions for the rest of us. So I don't have to write any more code.
Yep. You got to just take that next step, because, like where you are today, you're an example of just taking that next step, one little step at a time, and you can be an amazing person like Bjorn, conquering the world, PowerShelling everything.
Yep. Yeah. It's often the hard one, just like getting on stage. It's throwing yourself out there, and it is hard. But again, the PowerShell community is quite open, and we're quite friendly in most cases.
Yep. And a lot of us all started there. We all, I know my first repo was like my PowerShell scripts, or I think I called it PowerShell because my last name's Plow. I was like, PowerShell was the name of it. And it just had all these random scripts. They weren't
of
that
course.
great. I'd rewrite them now, but by doing things like that, you're potentially helping someone else in terms of, oh, they see a script. And I've found many a script that were in someone's My PowerShell scripts folder. It was like, oh, wow, that I didn't know you could do that. And I took it and borrowed it.
Of course.
And you make some friends along the way. Maybe you give someone some positive feedback. Maybe if you write imperfect code, you give someone the opportunity to start a relationship with you in terms of like giving some feedback. It's just putting yourself out there is challenging, but it's always worth it. We talk to people all the time. It is always worth the risk. And the PowerShell community couldn't be more welcoming for that.
I have a lot of friends, like non-developer, non-PowerShell friends in the community from exactly that, because they build cool stuff. Like just a couple of days ago, a person from the data community had done some release pipelines on setting up some I don't remember SQL databases migration tools, and it was like it had like 4 or 5 lines of PowerShell in there, and one of them used the match operator, and I was like, okay, I absolutely love this. I learned so much from writing this script, but this particular thing, I know that match is regex, and if you do it this way, you have unexpected behavior. So just fixing that pattern, and he was like, oh shit, I did not know. It's like really fun. So both of us came out of this like really small example of like one tiny thing that I knew about his code that you could just change, and it really helps. So it's
See, again, I would have assumed community. That regex was the problem too, but I wouldn't have had a solution. That's
regex is always the solution. Please remember, I'm a consultant. I need to create work for myself. Like leaving behind huge regex patterns. That's a good thing. No, not really. Regex is, if we go back to the GitHub Actions, like I said, I have the PSSecretScanner module. Yeah, that triggered my regex. So it's actually, the story behind it was that a company I worked for, they required security scanning tools to see if we leaked secrets. Whenever we push or published code to release, it needed to have been passed through a secret scanner tool. And it turns out their secret scanner didn't care about PS1 files. So I could just have whatever in my PowerShell code, and it would just go straight through it. And they were like, oh, we need to find a new tool. And being a bit like, being the person one am, I was like, how hard can it be? It's just looking for patterns, right? So I ended up having like this, the repository for PSSecretScanner has some really intense regex patterns searching for keys. Like I'm not entirely sure because they haven't open sourced it, but when running Microsoft's secret scanner tool, the GitHub's security secret scanner tool, when running that one, I found like 10% of all the secrets I can find with my own tool, which is fun. Nice. But regex is super cool. It's write once, read never language.
Yeah, true that. Now, so regex really well, or did you use like an online generator, or how did you go about that?
Well, many of the patterns are stolen and then changed, like because we have different flavors of regex. So you have a number of different ones, and .NET isn't really the default language people write in. So I stole some from a web page which I don't remember the name of, that does security tools.
The sedated security repo.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
I may be reading through your stuff right now.
Yeah, so I stole most of them, but I added a couple as well, and had to go through and fix them. And because they were written for JavaScript, which uses like different escape characters and different matching patterns and so on. But this sort of forced me to at least have a basic understanding of what every single one of those patterns does. So yeah, I think I did do regex before, but I think that the PSSecretScanner development was like, pushed me over the edge of maybe using a bit more regex than healthy. but it's a fun thing to do.
Well, it is very powerful when you can make it work. But
it is. It's really, really good.
So there is one thing that I want to talk about with your blog that I think it's awesome that you're doing this. So you are studying for your Azure 204 cert, and you're documenting your study process as you go along. Yep. I think that's awesome. That's not just here's some cool things that I did recently. It's you're going over how you studied for it without obviously dropping secrets and getting in trouble. And I don't know if that helps people with their own approach. I think that is an extremely valuable insight. Yeah,
it's sort of it's my summer project. I haven't taken the certification yet, so I haven't passed it. I don't know if I will. 18th. Yep. But it sort of ended up like in the pre-talk we did. Having vacation, it has some good and some bad stuff, like having a long vacation. I have many weeks doing nothing, and I was like, I have to have some kind of goal at least. So I started doing the AZ 204. I already have like the 100, the 2, 1, 3, and 400 certificates. So I was like, I need to fill in that mid-scope as well. And it's really fun. I like to study and I like to write. And it's just, one of the reasons I even have a blog was like writing back or feeding back into my own realizations. I don't really, it's fun if someone reads it and gets something from it, but I don't write it for people to read necessarily. I write it because I found something that I need to remember. And, doing each and every chapter, and you go back and think, okay, what is the learn chapter going through here? What is it that I should learn? Which takeaways should I have? And just the classic, back from school, can you repeat that with your own words? And like at least a couple of times already in the 4 or 5, 6, whatever chapters in I've come to places where like, well, no, I actually can. I need to go back and study this particular part a bit more because I can't really explain what this is right now. So I think it's for me to learn, and it's also again back to the whole throwing yourself out there and showing that, I have an MVP title right now, which makes me incredibly proud. I still don't know crap about everything. There's so much I lack, which is, I don't know, part of being open, I guess, part of making it easy for me too.
Well, also, one thing that was interesting is with your password generator blog, you mentioned that you don't have cookies or trackers or anything. So you have no idea if anyone even goes to your website. Well, now you do. Now you know I've been there.
Yeah, that was a historical decision. Like so many other people, I have started about 1 million blogs in my life, and always had, you set it up, and you had this beautiful CSS, and you had all these guest books where people could post comments, and you had trackers, and you can go in and see, which countries is everyone from? And I kind of realized last time I stopped blogging that I spent like more time just looking through the statistics than I actually wrote. So when I started this iteration of it, it was more like, you know what, I'm just going to do like the simplest, dumbest static page generator. It's one JavaScript file that does just translation from Markdown to a web page. That's everything it supports. It has themes, I think, but it's mostly just select the 2 colors you want. It's really, really dumb, but it helped me create stuff instead of focusing on that other stuff. I just write because I actually really, just like being on stage, I really enjoy writing. It's just something calming about it. And like I said, reiterating to myself, what is it I learned, or do I remember how to do this? So I have no idea if anyone has ever visited. If you have, you're free to follow me and leave a comment on my, Mastodon is where I hang out most of the time nowadays. So please do.
Well, you know what? You've answered a lot of our tough questions, and AZ204 is going to have some tough questions. But you know what's even tougher?
What?
The questions you're about to hear from Jordan. Jordan, you got some questions for this guy?
I do.
Can we stump him now?
I mean, so we had some true visionaries, some leaders, some, just the who's who of PowerShell go through, and every one of them has reported back that common parameters are the most difficult questions they've ever been asked. But unfortunately, even as much as I enjoy this conversation, I can't give you a pass. You have to go through the common parameters. Are you ready?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
All right.
We'll
Number
see
1.
how this goes.
What's the one time something went wrong in the job, and what did you learn from it?
I would say from my early first sysadmin, where you go from IT support to sysadmin. So one thing I learned was not every Active Directory has the "Are you sure?" when you delete an account. I learned it, and my chief financial officer was accountless for approximately 10 minutes. But I also learned the lesson that propagating AD accounts takes approximately 10 minutes between Sweden and Finland. Just enough time to save an account and actually see what it does and sort of rescue it.
So does that mean you had the recycle bin turned on for AD? Because normally
No.
rebuild, you'd lose Exchange too, because that's tied to the GUI.
Yeah, this was pre-Exchange. We're talking like Windows 2000 era, like really, really early. We did not have Exchange in place then. It was just like an account with a password and a lot of groups. So basically everything you had to do was go up and tell him like, okay, we had to do, you may have to recreate some, like fix some access, like whatever. So, but yeah, the slow propagation time is not always a bad thing. But I mean, mess ups at work, deleting stuff. I accidentally broke I wrote a PowerShell script to clean up profiles, because roaming profiles, well, they are a bloody mess. So I did a cleanup script, and so it turns out if you input like an erroneous user account matching your own username, or I don't even remember the scenario, but in some use cases, instead of just deleting a roaming profile that messed up, it deleted all the profiles on a computer. And if you delete the like default profiles from a Windows, I think it was XP time, well, bad stuff started to happen and no one could log in. So I guess lesson learned from that was, validate your input, have proper good validation and check. And even if you're writing just a one-liner, use your what ifs. Like, it's worth it. I have friends complaining about PowerShell being a verbose language. Like, it's a lot of verbosity to it. You can write so much code that doesn't really do what you set out to do. But the lesson learned from that is that it's actually worth using this stuff and outputting verbose messages. And like I said, validate your input, use your parameter validation, which is probably the best invention PowerShell ever had. Like, removing 90% of your code with a parameter validation script is mind-blowingly good. So yeah, I think I haven't really destroyed like the network of all Sweden yet, but I've destroyed or removed a couple of users and messed up a university. Put a router in the wrong direction, which sort of killed an entire building at the university in Sweden, because instead of routing traffic to my own network, I distributed IP addresses to the entire house. Shit you do.
I like how we got multiple examples.
But it's like everyone messes up. I think the most important lesson of all, and one of the things that back to the DevOps movement and why I got stuck in it, one of the things that when I read about it the first time really blew my mind was the concept of blameless post-mortems. Because coming from like a support department and sitting in a small company IT department, that was like not unheard of. Like, if someone messed up, they got bashed by the boss. That's just how it was. But instead of doing that, just changing the mindset into, okay, we messed up. How do we write a test, or how do we create a function, or how do we do whatever so we don't mess up like this again? We will mess up, of course, but let's try a new mistake the next time. Blameless post-mortems is like the best invention ever.
It's not a bad one. And I could really use those.
All right. It helps.
Yeah, second common parameter. It only gets more difficult from there.
Okay.
All right, with everything you know now, what's one bit of advice you'd like to give your younger self when you're first starting in IT?
I know this sounds wrong, and I've said it in some other situations as well, but stop caring. Like, you spend so much time struggling to, reach the stars or improving or struggling to, be like your heroes. But when you stop sort of caring and just do stuff because it's fun, then it just sort of works out that way. Like, I've been struggling. I've been on the path to, eventually sometime in my life, I want to have the MVP title. I've been doing that for well over 10 years now. But it wasn't until a couple of years ago, like with the blog, when I stopped caring, do people read? No, instead of caring, let's just write stuff. Or, instead of caring if someone thinks it's a bad presentation, let's do it because it's fun. Stop caring about what others think. That would be my one recommendation. Stop giving a crap what people say about you, because
that
one is cool stuff.
Very valuable, but it's also far easier to say than to execute.
That's absolutely. Absolutely. That's why it took me many, many years to get there. Like, it's not an easy thing to don't care what people think about you. Everyone cares what people think about you. It's just live with it. And one thing I would say is stop deleting your old code, because that's also one of the things I realized. I actually found, that was many years ago as well, but you found your first scripts, and it's really, really fun to go back and look at those. That's also one of the reasons you, like you said, Andrew, you should set up a GitHub account and start storing your stuff, because seeing your learning process is just incredibly valuable. Not just because you can laugh at yourself and say, oh, look how ugly my code was, but because you can go back and see that, oh my God, look how much I've learned through these years. And going back and redoing the same thing. Okay, my first task was like creating users on a local computer. I think that was like the first, it was something with I don't remember. But going back and redoing that same script over and over again, how would I do it now? It's a great way of visualizing your process and realizing that you learned stuff. Otherwise, your own learning process is mostly hidden from yourself, because it just,
yeah.
So stop deleting stuff.
That's a great tip. And, this is a career for most of us, right? We're going to be in here for the foreseeable future. Who you are today is not your final form. And it's okay to not be perfect, and it's okay to not have amazing code, but you have to put yourself out there to be able to take those steps and to be able to reflect one day and be like, wow, I've come a long way since those projects whenever I first created that repo.
Exactly.
Thanks to those people on the PowerShell podcast telling me to.
Exactly. So don't delete.
Okay. All right. Last one. And this one is the one that trips up the most people. This is where they give up. What are your 3 favorite modules in PowerShell?
Oh, yeah. It is a tough one. But arguably, I would say, I don't know how many they are by heart, because I haven't looked in a long time, but the core modules. Because the core modules, first of all, wherever you go, that's what you have. And they are so complete in what they are. Like, there's just so much you can do with, the item commandlets. Like, whatever you're working with, just knowing the item commandlets by heart is incredibly valuable. And it's even to the point where I go back, I don't know how often, like we do in a lot of training PowerShell courses, 3-4 advanced courses a year for internal staff. And every single time I go through this, I learn stuff myself about how you can use them. Same goes, of course, with the basic commands. Get command, get help, get member. Like, it's just the flexibility and the learnability of PowerShell that the base commands brings is just incredible. But there's also another reason too why I say this, and that's because, again, I'm a consultant. I show up at new places all the time, which means I don't always have access to everything. And I've even been to high security places where it's like installing a module. No way. You get what you have. So you kind of need to learn to live with what's installed, which is also like, abandoning PowerShell 5 or Windows PowerShell. And that's not going to happen in the near future, because in so many places, that's what you get. And that's also like, if we go back a bit, like to the security part of it all and the release and the release management part of it all, like one of the good and bad parts about this is that we still live in a community or in a society where so many people have to have security reviews. So how do you manage modules when each and every new release have to go through a security review through a security department that takes 3 weeks to do an update of a software? Like, how do we do this with a module that's updated once a week? Like, I don't really know. So the common core, because that's what made PowerShell as powerful and as useful as it is. Then, of course, I mean, we have hero modules like the SQL stuff from Rob and Chrissy and their crew. It's like mind-blowingly good. Pester, favorite, absolutely. I use Pester all the time. I do test-driven development for most of my projects even. Like, yeah, it's just so incredibly good. And trying to understand scopes in Pester is like one of the hardest thing I've ever done. I have no idea how they work still, but it's just so beautifully written code and so fun to read through because it's just mind-blowingly good. So, okay, if we count core modules as one, then I would say the core modules, Pester, and let's say PSSecretScanner, because it's actually quite useful. I use it all the time. I can be egotistical.
I know for a fact that if I had that in my past, it would come back with some negative reports for me. So I think definitely everyone could use it.
Yep. Next up on the to-do list there is a VS Code plugin, and also Git. I completely lost the word for it. Commit hooks. So you can't commit something or push it with a password in it. But yeah.
Oh, nice.
All right. Well, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Bjorn, but this whole time we've been talking, you have been in the presence of a known celebrity. So, much like Superman, when Andrew goes through his day-to-day life, he can't go all out with his shilling because it's too dangerous, it's too powerful. Just like Superman has to go through and make sure he doesn't, accidentally rip the door off the car. So every time we see him show, no, it's going to sound like the greatest shill you've ever heard, but just know that he's pulling back because for our own safety, so we can go on with our lives, he can't go full bore.
Yeah.
But now we get to sit back from our seat while we witness the struggle live. Take it away, Andrew.
Jordan, I'm thinking back to our first few episodes when I first started doing these, and I'm not saying I'm so great now. Some people like you say I'm amazing, but I remember how funny it was to be so nervous. Like for some reason, it was the most nervous part of the whole episode, and I get this amazing intro, and I'm still getting this amazing intro, and maybe I've gotten a little bit better. But listen, if you're listening, thank you so much. Welcome to the thrill of the ride, the PowerShell, if you will. Now, we've had an amazing conversation with Bjorn, and how better to cap this off than with a like, a comment, or a subscribe. And tell you what, I'll do you one better. You can even give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. You can hear us anywhere. We're here for you every single week, 75 plus episodes. If you have a question, you can hit us up, powershell@pdq.com. We'll read it. We'll respond. We're here for you week after week. You can find me on the internet at Andrew Platek. He's DevOps Jordan. Bjorn, where can people find you, my man?
Most commonly on Mastodon right now. Mastodon.nu/@Bjompen. Everywhere, whatever platform you are, Bjompen, that's probably me.
And your website, what is that?
Bjompen.com.
Perfect.
And github.com/Bjompen.
Consistency is key. I like it. Right. Thanks so much for taking time to talk to us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for joining the PowerShell Podcast with your hosts, Jordan Hammond and Andrew Plough.
I dig it.
The PowerShell Podcast is a production of PDQ.com, making device management simple, secure, and pretty damn quick.